Tonight, President Trump is weighing in on the latest version of the Russia-Ukraine potential peace deal.
What kinds of concessions are the Russians going to have to make?
Well, they're making concessions. Their big concession is they stop fighting and they don't take any more land.
Now, despite what you heard there, the Ukrainian officials have expressed some optimism about a potential deal to end this war after the latest round of talks has turned the president's 28-point plan, which heavily favored Russia, into a somewhat pared-back 19-point version. Now, the details of the plan haven't come out yet. We haven't actually seen them released. There is a Ukrainian official tonight, though, who's telling the Financial Times they believe what has changed from 28 points to 19 is more favorable to Kyiv. And this comes as the deadline that was supposed to happen this week, it appears to be sliding from days ago when the president was publicly urging Ukrainian President Zelensky to take a deal. It's a deal Zelensky had said at the time would cost his nation its dignity. There are still some really big sticking points on this tonight, but it comes as the president says the Army Secretary, Dan Driscoll, who is meeting with Russian officials in Abu Dhabi today, he's going to be in Kyiv later this week. As the president says, his special envoy and one of his closest advisors, Steve Witkoff, and potentially also his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, are going to be meeting with President Putin in Moscow next week. There's also more news on that front tonight because Bloomberg News reported out a transcript of a phone call that happened between Steve Witkoff and a top aide to Putin back in October. The transcript showed how Witkoff was actively advising the Russians on how Putin should best approach Trump. I'm quoting from the transcript that Bloomberg reported tonight, and it says, quote, "I would make the call and just reiterate that you congratulate the president on the Gaza achievement, that you supported it, that you respect that he is a man of peace, and you're really glad to have seen it happen. So I would say that I think from that, it's going to be a really good call," Witkoff said. Here's how the president responded when he was asked about Witkoff coaching the Russians on how to approach the U.S. president tonight.
He's going to sell Ukraine to Russia. That's what a deal maker does. I haven't heard it, but I heard it was standard negotiation. And I would imagine he's saying the same thing to Ukraine because each party has to give and take.
My source tonight is Garry Kasparov, a chess grandmaster and political activist who actually fled Putin's regime in 2013. He's also the founder and chairman of the Renew Democracy Initiative. And it's great to have you here tonight, just as we're in this moment. On the president, though, they're saying that he believes that's just standard negotiating procedure for Steve Witkoff to tell top Russian aides how Putin should approach Trump. Do you think that's standard?
Maybe by Trump's standards is standard. It's not standard at all. Witkoff is not working for the United States government, for United States interest. He is working for Donald Trump and for Donald Trump's personal interest. And of course, he has been cooperating with Russia because the whole deal is about glorification for Trump, of course, and for monetization, also for Trump and for his inner circle. So we have to look at this deal and recognize it's not just heavily favored Russian. It's written by Russians. Most of the deal is ChatGPT translation from Russian. And most of these points of so-called Trump's 28 points plan have been circulated months ago. So it's basically a demand of Ukraine to capitulate. And it's absolute shame. It's probably an indelible stain that will remain for a long time on America's conscience that the United States president have been pushing a heroic nation to capitulate after many years of successfully defending their land against brutal aggression.
Secretary Rubio denied that it was written by the Russians, but you're saying the points of this plan, the 28-piece plan that came together recently, was actually floating out there months ago. Absolutely,
it's known. Secretary Rubio just denies things and then denies his denials on a regular basis. So there's certain things that you don't even discuss. Yes, it's Russian plan, and it included every demand that Putin had ages ago. And by the way, Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov, in his comments earlier today, said that it's any attempt to change this 28 points plan will violate I emphasize, both the spirit and letter of Anchorage agreement. I read it, that is Anchorage. Trump already sold Ukraine down the river to Putin.
Yeah, and there was no agreement that came out of Anchorage.
Yes.
None that we saw on paper.
That's exactly it. No, there was an agreement. We just didn't see it. And when we just look at these points in this, I think everybody talks about territorial concessions. And of course, it's impossible for Ukraine to give up the most fortified defense line and basically make Kyiv defenseless based on Putin's promise. And by the way, it's also on the record. Putin violated every promise he made towards Ukraine, and he's never honored any agreement that had been signed regarding Ukraine. Probably other agreements as well, but let's talk about Ukraine now. But there's also something important there. It's money. Because when you see Witkoff and Kushner negotiating on America's behalf, you understand this is not about American interest. This is about Trump's personal interest. Because these guys have nothing to do with U.S. government. But there are important elements of the agreement when they talk about money. It's how to use Russian frozen funds. Mostly of them are just held in Europe and Belgium, nearly $200 billion. And this agreement basically handed over to America, read to Witkoff and Kushner. That's all about. I mean, the rest is just, it's a smokescreen. Nobody cares about Ukraine territory. It's a real estate deal, and Kushner and Witkoff will have to benefit mostly at the expense of Ukrainians and European security.
Well, and a Republican congressman was pretty critical of Witkoff going over there. And after this transcript came out, because he called it Brian Fitzpatrick said it's a major problem and one of the many reasons these ridiculous sideshows and secret meetings need to stop. He says Secretary of State Marco Rubio needs to be able to do his job in a fair and objective manner. Can I ask you, though, because I can hear some people from the White House listening to your answer just now, and they may say, well, Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner were instrumental in helping, broker getting the hostages home out of Gaza in the Middle East, and what happened there. What would you say to that?
Look, we're talking about Ukraine. I don't want you to mix these two things. So for me, it's just...
I'm just saying that they might argue they were effective there. Maybe they could be effective here.
You should talk to Israelis about their effectiveness and Palestinians. I know what I could see and how I could evaluate their role in this deal. They are in this deal to make money. That's it. And Witkoff is not working for American interest. And I would, if we had functioning Congress and functioning Senate, so we would have to bring Witkoff and Kushner to testify and ask many unpleasant questions about their relations with Vladimir Putin, with Russians, because also don't forget another important fact. On the Russian side, it was not a foreign minister. It was Dmitriev. It's known in Russia as a Putin's wallet. So you had two money men talking on behalf of their bosses.
It could be remarkable to see Jared Kushner potentially in Moscow as soon as next week.
Of course, why not? Again, it's the $200 billion. It's a serious amount of money, and those are the provisions that will end up, these funds for reconstruction of Ukraine under control of Americans. Again, when we read Americans, we have to understand it's Kushner and Witkoff.
Garry Kasparov, thank you for joining us here tonight. Really appreciate your insight on this.